Sandra, a 24-years-old lady, had always known how cruel life could be, yet she never allowed it to break her spirit. She was an orphan, raised by the streets, taught by hardship, and molded by survival. From a young age, she had learned how to live with almost nothing. Every coin mattered, every drop of water was gold, and every smile she gave was painted with silent pain. She worked in a small, steamy laundry shop tucked away in the corner of a noisy Lagos neighborhood. The walls of the shop were chipped and stained with years of hot iron burns, bleach splashes, and unspoken struggles. Sandra didn't complain. She swept, washed, folded, and ironed from sunrise till nightfall. She slept on a small mat in a corner of the laundry room, beside buckets of soap and worn-out clothes. That tiny space, although barely livable, was her world. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. A woman walked in with confidence that shook the weak wooden doors. Tall, dressed in silk and perfume, she handed over a gold-colored gown and warned that it must be spotless before the next morning. Her name was Isabella. Sandra handled the dress with care. But while trying to shift a bucket of clean water, she slipped. The water splashed, not on the floor, but straight onto Isabella's designer handbag. There was silence. Then came the shouting. Isabella's voice thundered through the room, accusing Sandra of ruining a bag worth more than her life. Sandra apologized, knelt, begged, even offered to clean it with the finest soap they had. But Isabella wasn't there for peace. She demanded Sandra's dismissal on the spot. And she got it. The shop owner, too afraid to lose high-paying clients, let Sandra go with nothing. No payment. No warning. Just a cold "leave now." That night, Sandra walked through the rain with her tiny bag of clothes. No umbrella. No food. Nowhere to sleep. She passed by people with warm homes and dry jackets, but none of them looked her way. She finally found an unfinished building with no doors, just concrete and silence. Curling up on a piece of wood under the open sky, Sandra hugged her thin shirt and cried softly. Not just from hunger, not just from the cold, but from the weight of being tossed aside so easily. But even then, she didn't give up. The next morning, she cleaned her face with rainwater, tied her scarf neatly, and walked toward a construction site. It was loud, dusty, and filled with shouting men, but she didn't care. She just wanted to work. "Please," she said to the site manager, "let me carry blocks. I don't want to steal. I just need to eat." The man laughed at first. But when he saw the seriousness in her eyes, he hesitated. Then, before he could speak, a black Jeep pulled in. It was sleek, polished, and clearly out of place. From it stepped Mr. Harry Francis, owner of the site and a respected billionaire businessman known for his sharp decisions. He noticed Sandra standing near the entrance, her eyes determined but tired. Curious, he walked toward her. She looked nothing like the people who usually begged him for money. She didn't even ask him for food. She only asked to work. Mr. Harry frowned. "This is no place for you," he said simply. And just like that, Sandra thought he would walk away. But he didn't. Instead, he looked at the site manager and said, "She can't work here. But I'll take her to my house. She'll be my new maid." Sandra was shocked. She hadn't expected help, especially not from someone as wealthy as Harry. And just like that, the life she thought had ended the day before, had taken a new turn. But little did she know, the same woman who destroyed her life at the laundry shop was waiting for her at Harry's mansion. The storm was far from over. When Sandra stepped into Mr. Harry's mansion, she felt like she had entered another world. The floors sparkled like mirrors, the walls held paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum, and the chandeliers hanging from the ceiling sparkled like frozen stars. It was everything her small laundry shop wasn't. But beauty can be a clever disguise. That same evening, as she was shown her room, a tiny but clean space behind the kitchen, Sandra silently thanked God. She had food in her stomach, a roof over her head, and honest work. She promised herself that she would not disappoint Mr. Harry. What she didn't expect was to see Isabella again. It happened the next morning. Sandra was cleaning the staircase when she heard high heels clicking toward her. She looked up, and her heart sank. Isabella, dressed in expensive silk and heavy makeup, stood glaring at her. "What are you doing here?" Isabella hissed, her voice low but full of fire. Sandra froze, her cleaning cloth in hand. She bowed slightly, too shocked to respond. Mr. Harry walked in at that moment, smiling. "Good morning, darling," he greeted Isabella. Then, turning to Sandra, he said, "She's the new maid I told you about. She's hardworking and respectful. I hope you two get along." Isabella smiled sweetly at Harry, but the moment he turned away, that smile vanished. She gave Sandra a sharp look that said everything: "You don't belong here." From that day on, Sandra's real troubles began. Isabella refused to let her eat in peace. She would tell the cook not to serve her, claiming Sandra had stolen food. She made her clean the same rooms twice and forced her to do heavy chores meant for the male staff. She even tripped Sandra once, pretending it was an accident. Still, Sandra endured it all without complaint. Every time Harry came home, he would smile at her and ask how she was doing, and Sandra would answer, "I'm fine, sir." Because in truth, she didn't want to cause trouble. She just wanted peace. But one day, something unexpected happened. Harry came home with a small gift box. He called Sandra to the sitting room and handed it to her. "You've been doing a good job. I noticed. This is just a little something." Sandra opened the box with shaky hands. Inside was a simple but beautiful dress, soft pink with tiny flowers along the neckline. She had never owned something so fine. Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to kneel and thank him, but Harry smiled and said, "No need for all that. Just keep being you." Sandra clutched the dress to her chest that night, smiling for the first time in a long time. But happiness, in her life, never lasted long. 2 days later, the dress was gone. She searched every corner of her room but couldn't find it. When she stepped out to ask the other staff, she saw it, torn into pieces, lying beside the dustbin. Isabella had done it. No one said a word, but everyone knew. The other maids looked away, scared of losing their jobs if they spoke the truth. Sandra picked up the pieces quietly and took them back to her room. She didn't cry. She just folded the ruined dress and placed it under her pillow like a broken dream. That night, she prayed silently. Not for revenge. Not even for a better life. She prayed for strength. Because somehow, deep down, she felt her journey was far from over. And something was about to change, forever. The next few days at the mansion were quiet, but not peaceful. Sandra continued with her chores, moving silently through the halls like a shadow. The dress incident had left a deep wound in her heart, but she said nothing. She didn't want Mr. Harry to think she came into his home to cause drama. So she smiled, cleaned, and stayed out of Isabella's way. But Isabella wasn't done. She had seen the way Harry looked at Sandra, not like a lover, but like someone who admired her spirit. And that scared Isabella. She had spent years trying to win Harry's heart. She wore the finest clothes, went to the best salons, and tried to look perfect in every way. But all Harry gave her was polite affection, not true love. Now this maid, this orphan, this nobody, was winning him with nothing but kindness. So Isabella planned something cruel. One Sunday evening, she called all the house staff into the dining room. Harry was away on a business trip, and Isabella wore a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let's eat together," she said sweetly. No one should work on an empty stomach. Everyone was shocked, including Sandra. It was the first time Isabella had offered food to the maids and security men. They all sat down slowly. Isabella personally served Sandra a plate of rice and stew, her hands moving carefully like an actress on stage. Sandra looked at the food and hesitated. Isabella smiled at her and said, "Eat. It's just food, not poison." The room laughed lightly, but Sandra's heart beat faster. Something felt wrong. The stew smelled odd, bitter even. But she didn't want to cause a scene. So she took a small spoonful and ate quietly. Minutes later, Isabella stood up and shouted, "Sandra has poisoned me." Everyone turned in confusion. "She tried to kill me." Isabella screamed, falling to the floor and holding her stomach. "She put something in my food." Sandra stood up, shocked and confused. "I didn't cook it," she whispered, but her voice trembled. "You served yourself, didn't you?" Isabella yelled. "You were the only one close to my plate." The guards ran in. The house was in chaos. Sandra tried to explain, but no one listened. Then, something terrible happened. Sandra looked around the room, eyes wide with fear, and without a word, she grabbed Isabella's untouched plate, the one she claimed was poisoned, and began eating from it. Spoon after spoon. Everyone gasped. "No," the cook shouted, running toward her. But it was too late. Within minutes, Sandra collapsed. The entire house was thrown into panic. An ambulance was called. Sandra was rushed to the hospital, her body trembling and her breath faint. No one knew if she would survive the night. Isabella, shocked by the turn of events, quietly went to her room, trying to appear innocent. But what she didn't know was that one of the indoor security cameras had been updated just a week earlier, right above the dining room. And Mr. Harry, returning home later that night, went straight to his security room to check the footage after hearing the news. What he saw changed everything. There, in clear view, Isabella was seen switching her plate with Sandra's when no one was looking. It wasn't Sandra who poisoned anything. It was Isabella. Harry stood frozen, replaying the footage again and again, his face hard with disbelief. Then he stood up and walked out of the room. The pain in his heart was deep, not just because of the betrayal, but because the one person he had trusted most had tried to destroy the one person who expected nothing from him. The next morning, the mansion would not be the same. But Sandra was still fighting for her life. Morning came slowly. The sun rose over the mansion, but its light didn't reach the hearts of those inside. Everyone moved quietly, waiting for news from the hospital. Sandra was still unconscious. The doctors had managed to stabilize her, but she hadn't opened her eyes. Her body was weak, but her will to live had not given up. In the mansion, tension filled the air. Isabella, dressed in a soft cream gown, tried to carry on like nothing had happened. She smiled at the maids, gave polite instructions, and even watered the flowers in the garden as if she hadn't tried to ruin someone's life the night before. But unknown to her, a storm was already building. Mr. Harry had not slept a wink. After watching the security footage repeatedly, he sent copies of it to his personal lawyer and instructed the head of security to lock every exit in the house. No one was allowed to leave, not even Isabella. At 10 a.m., he returned from the hospital. Sandra was still alive, still breathing, but her body was badly affected by the poisoned food. The doctor had confirmed that if she had eaten just a little more, it would have taken her life. As Harry entered his house, all the staff gathered in silence. They could feel something was about to happen. Harry didn't speak at first. He walked to the center of the living room, turned on the TV screen that was mounted to the wall, and pressed play on a USB stick. The entire staff watched as the security footage played. Gasps filled the room. The truth was undeniable. Isabella stood frozen as everyone turned to her. "How could you?" Harry's voice was calm but sharp. "You tried to kill an innocent girl, just because of your pride." Isabella's eyes darted from face to face, searching for someone to defend her. But no one dared. "I didn't mean to," Harry raised his hand. "You did. And I'm done pretending I don't see your true colors. He turned to the security guards. Pack her things. I don't want to see her here again. Isabella's eyes widened. You're throwing me out. After everything? For a maid? Harry didn't answer. The guards led her away. Her screams faded down the hallway. Outside, she was pushed into her waiting car, and the gates closed behind her, this time, forever. The house remained quiet for the rest of the day. That evening, Harry sat alone in the living room. His mind kept drifting to the girl in the hospital, the one who had eaten poisoned food to prove her innocence. He remembered the tears in her eyes when he gifted her the pink dress, and the quiet strength she carried despite everything thrown her way. He knew now, without a doubt, that Sandra wasn't just a maid. She was something more. Later that night, he returned to the hospital. Sandra was still asleep, but her breathing was steady. The nurse smiled and said, "She's fighting hard. She has a strong heart." Harry nodded quietly, then sat by her bedside. For the first time in years, he held someone's hand, not out of duty or expectation, but out of genuine care. His fingers gently wrapped around Sandra's cold ones, and he whispered words no one else could hear. "I'll protect you now. No more pain. No more fear." He didn't know if she could hear him. But somewhere, deep inside that quiet room, a tear slipped from Sandra's closed eye. And Harry knew. She heard. 3 days passed. Sandra opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the white ceiling above her. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The smell of medicine and the soft beep of machines surrounded her. Her body felt weak, like she had just climbed a tall mountain. A nurse noticed and smiled. "You're awake," she said gently, calling for the doctor. Memories came rushing back, the poisoned food, Isabella's cold stare, the confusion, and then the darkness. But more than anything, she remembered Mr. Harry's kind face. He had believed in her when no one else had. Or at least, she hoped he had. Later that morning, the hospital door opened slowly. Harry walked in, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers and a small thermos flask. He looked tired, but when he saw Sandra awake, his face lit up with relief. He didn't speak right away. He just placed the flowers beside her bed and poured warm pap into a small cup. "I thought you might be hungry," he said simply, placing it near her hand. Sandra tried to sit up, and Harry quickly helped, adjusting her pillow. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely there. "I didn't mean to cause, you did nothing wrong," Harry interrupted softly. "Nothing. I should be the one saying sorry." He told her everything, how he had seen the footage, how Isabella was gone, how everyone now knew the truth. Sandra listened quietly, her eyes filling with tears, not just from the pain, but from something deeper. Relief. Gratitude. Hope. "I never expected any of this," she whispered. "I know," Harry said. "But maybe it's time you expected better things. Because you deserve them." After that day, Sandra's recovery moved faster. She smiled more. She spoke more. Nurses would say they hadn't seen a stronger patient in a long time. 2 weeks later, she returned to the mansion, but this time, she wasn't just a maid. She was someone everyone respected now. The cook made sure her food was served first. The other maids looked at her with admiration. The guards greeted her warmly each day. And Harry, he didn't treat her like a worker anymore. He treated her like a friend. He gave her a small library in one of the guest rooms. "You said once you never got the chance to finish school," he told her. "Now's your chance." Sandra was speechless. He brought in private tutors, got her enrolled in an adult learning program, and told her he would support her as far as she wanted to go. But what touched Sandra most was not the books, the food, or even the respect. It was Harry himself. He never once treated her like a favor he was doing. He never made her feel less than she was. Instead, he made her believe she could still dream. That her life, no matter how hard it had been, was not over. And slowly, without warning, something gentle began to grow between them. It wasn't loud or rushed. It was quiet and deep. A friendship, wrapped in trust and warmed by kindness. It came from shared moments, a smile over breakfast, a walk in the garden, a look that said more than words ever could. But both of them were afraid to say what was already in their hearts. Sandra feared she wasn't enough. Harry feared he might lose the only woman who had ever touched his soul without asking for anything in return. And so, they both waited. Until one rainy evening, something would finally push the truth into the light. The sky darkened earlier than usual. Heavy clouds gathered above the mansion, and within minutes, rain began to pour, hitting the windows like tiny pebbles. Thunder growled in the distance. Inside the house, most of the staff had already retired for the night. But Sandra stood by the window, watching the storm. Her mind was full. Since returning from the hospital, life had changed so much. She had gone from scrubbing floors to reading books, from being mocked to being respected. But the biggest change of all was Mr. Harry. Every day, he showed her kindness that didn't feel forced. He listened when she spoke. He encouraged her dreams. He made her laugh, something she hadn't done freely in years. Yet, every time her heart whispered that it might be love, her fears shouted louder. She was a former maid. He was a billionaire. Could love cross such a wide gap? She didn't know Harry was feeling the same way that very night. He stood in his study, holding a small photo of his late mother. She had always told him, "Find a woman who sees your heart, not your wallet." And now, that woman stood just across the hallway, watching the rain, completely unaware of the space she had carved inside his soul. He had tried to fight the feeling. But seeing her rise from betrayal and pain, seeing how she forgave and pushed forward, seeing how she treated everyone with the same gentle spirit, he knew. He loved her. But how do you tell a woman like Sandra, who had lost so much, who had been used and discarded, that she's the treasure you've been searching for all along? Harry walked down the hallway, barefoot, the soft carpet muffling his steps. As he reached the window, Sandra turned slightly, startled. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said gently. Sandra smiled. "The rain is calming." "Yes. But sometimes, it brings answers." They stood in silence, listening to the thunder rumble far away. "I want to ask you something," Harry said suddenly. Sandra looked at him, unsure. He continued, his voice low and calm, "If life had treated you differently, if you had grown up with family, love, and comfort, what would you have become?" Sandra thought for a moment. Her voice was soft. "A teacher. Or maybe someone who helps girls like me. I always wished someone had helped me earlier." Harry nodded. "That's why I believe in you. Not because of your past, but because of your heart." Sandra looked down, trying to hold back tears. "You've changed this house, Sandra. You've changed me," he said, stepping closer. The air between them grew still. The sound of rain filled the silence. Harry looked into her eyes. "What I feel for you is real. I don't care what your past looks like. I only care about what your future could be, if you'll let me be part of it." Sandra's heart pounded. The words were like a dream. She didn't speak right away. She simply nodded, a tear escaping down her cheek. In that moment, no diamond could have shone brighter than her smile. No palace could have felt richer than that quiet hallway. Outside, the rain slowed down. The thunder drifted away. And inside, two hearts finally found what they had been searching for, not in riches, not in status, but in each other. The maid had not just stolen his heart. She had healed it. Love, when it's real, doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply shows up, quiet, steady, and honest. And that's how life became for Sandra and Harry after that rainy night. Their days flowed like a gentle river. Harry didn't rush her, and Sandra didn't hide anymore. They talked, laughed, worked side by side, and built something rare: trust. The staff, once unsure, now smiled when they passed by. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was admiration. But love comes with its own trials. One morning, as Sandra prepared for her lessons, she was called into the main living room. A group of women, dressed in sharp suits and flashy heels, sat on the sofas. They were board members from one of Harry's companies. Their eyes scanned Sandra from head to toe, and their smiles were tight. "She's your new fiancée?" one asked, trying to sound polite. Harry nodded calmly. "She is." The women exchanged looks. "She used to be your maid, right?" Harry's voice remained firm. "Yes. And she has more dignity and kindness than most people I've ever met." They didn't say much after that. But the message was clear: they didn't approve. Sandra saw it in their faces. She had no rich parents. No famous name. No polished background. To them, she didn't belong. That night, Sandra sat alone in the garden, her books open on her lap but her eyes far away. She loved Harry. She trusted him. But could love survive the weight of judgment, pressure, and whispers? Harry found her there, just as the stars began to light the sky. "You heard what they said," she said softly. "I heard what they thought," he replied, taking a seat beside her. "But I don't care about their opinions." Sandra looked at him, unsure. "But they're part of your world." "No," Harry said, "they're part of my business. You are my world." She didn't know what to say. But she knew in that moment, nothing anyone thought could change what they had. Soon after, Harry made an announcement at a major business event, in front of hundreds of eyes and cameras. He introduced Sandra, not as a former maid, not as a pity project, but as his bride-to-be. "She is the woman I admire, respect, and love. Her past doesn't define her. Her strength does." The room was silent. And then, one by one, people began to clap. Not all. But enough. Sandra watched from the crowd, heart pounding. She had never been seen like this before. Not as a servant. Not as someone to look down on. But as a woman worthy of love. Preparations for the wedding began soon after. It wasn't about the size or the cost. Harry asked her what she wanted. "Something simple," she said. "But beautiful. Just like her heart." And as they planned their future together, Sandra remembered all the nights she had slept in unfinished buildings, all the times she had gone to bed hungry, all the times she had been forgotten. Now, she was being celebrated. And it was only the beginning. The sun rose gently on the day that would change Sandra's life forever. The air was calm. Birds sang softly from the garden trees. Inside the mansion, the house was filled with quiet excitement, not the noisy, chaotic kind, but the kind that comes with meaning. Today was not just a wedding. It was the closing of a painful chapter and the opening of a brighter one. Sandra stood in front of a large mirror in a room she once cleaned with bare hands. But today, she didn't hold a mop or a dusting cloth. She wore a dress of cream-white silk, simple yet elegant, like her. Her natural beauty shone without needing gold or glitter. Her heart, though trembling, was filled with peace. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from fear, but from the memory of how far she had come. From the orphan girl with no name, to the laundry maid sleeping beside soap buckets, to the woman about to marry a man who saw her heart before her status. Downstairs, Harry waited. Dressed in a light gray suit, he looked calm but couldn't hide the shine in his eyes. For a man who had faced boardrooms full of billionaires, this moment made his hands sweat. But it wasn't nervousness. It was joy. Guests filled the garden where the ceremony would take place. It wasn't a crowd of celebrities or high society people. It was filled with those who mattered: his few trusted friends, loyal staff, Sandra's former tutor, the kind nurse who cared for her in the hospital, and a few young girls Sandra had started mentoring. As the soft wedding music began, all heads turned. Sandra walked down the aisle, slowly, her step steady, her smile gentle. People whispered, not with mockery, but with wonder. She wasn't just beautiful. She was glowing with grace. Harry's eyes didn't leave her for a second. As she reached him, he held her hands and whispered, "You're my miracle." And with simple vows that held more weight than fancy promises, they became husband and wife. There were no fireworks, no flashy performances. But there was something richer, genuine love. After the ceremony, during the soft dinner under the garden lights, Harry stood to speak. "I've made many deals in my life. I've owned lands, companies, and chains of businesses. But none of that compares to what I found in Sandra. She didn't walk into my life to take. She came to survive. But instead, she gave me something I had lost long ago, humility, and a love that asks for nothing." Sandra stood as well, and for the first time, addressed everyone boldly. "I used to sleep on hard floors and wash strangers' clothes for food. I was forgotten by life. But I never stopped believing in goodness. I never stopped hoping. And because of that, I found love. I found purpose." The applause was long and heartfelt. That night, under the stars, Harry and Sandra danced slowly, not to impress anyone, but to celebrate a truth that many people often forget: you don't need a perfect past to have a beautiful future. Months passed after the wedding, but Sandra remained the same humble woman she had always been. Though now married to one of the country's most respected billionaires, she didn't let the wealth change her heart. Instead of living only in comfort, Sandra used her new life to create something she had always wished for as a child, a place where forgotten girls could find hope. With Harry's full support, she launched the Sandra Foundation, a home and learning center for orphaned and abandoned girls. The building stood on the same land where her old laundry shop once operated. It was her way of turning her pain into purpose. The foundation provided food, clothing, school supplies, emotional support, and most importantly, love. Every morning, Sandra arrived with a gentle smile, often carrying her books, so the girls could see that learning never ends. She taught them how to read, how to speak with confidence, and how to believe in themselves. To them, she wasn't just a founder, she was a role model. Harry, now busier than ever with his businesses, always made time for Sandra's work. Sometimes, he would quietly sit at the back of the classroom, listening to her teach the girls. Seeing her speak with passion, with fire in her voice, made him fall in love with her again and again. News about the foundation spread fast. Journalists began writing articles about the maid who became a mentor, and schools requested Sandra to speak at their graduation ceremonies. Still, she never let fame distract her. She often told the girls, success isn't about being rich. It's about how many lives you can lift. One afternoon, as Sandra sat in her small office reviewing new applications for the foundation, a familiar face entered. That IT was the nurse who had cared for her during her days in the hospital. "I came to say thank you," the nurse said, her eyes moist. "I never told you, but the day you opened your eyes in that hospital, something in me changed. Seeing you fight for your life, now seeing you fight for others, it reminds me why I became a nurse." Sandra stood and hugged her. That evening, as the sun set and the foundation children played outside, Sandra and Harry walked hand in hand down the quiet garden path. "Do you ever feel like all this is a dream?" Harry asked gently. Sandra smiled. "No. Because I lived through the nightmare." They paused, watching the children run, laugh, and chase butterflies. Sandra whispered, "This is what love is meant to build. Not just a house, but a future." And Harry, with eyes full of pride, nodded, "Yes. And you, Sandra, are the heart of that future." Their story, once hidden in pain, was now a light for others. A message that no background is too broken to be healed. That love, when wrapped in humility, can rise from the lowest of places to stand tall. Sandra had not just stolen Harry's heart. She had touched the hearts of thousands. Years passed, but the story of Sandra and Harry never faded. What started as a quiet act of kindness grew into a legacy. The Sandra Foundation expanded to other towns and cities, touching the lives of countless girls who had once known nothing but suffering. Some of them became teachers. Some became nurses. Some even became lawyers. But all of them carried Sandra's story in their hearts. Sandra remained grounded. She didn't trade her humility for luxury. Even with access to everything money could buy, she often wore simple clothes, preferred home-cooked meals, and still walked through the foundation halls, hugging the children and calling each one by name. At home, she and Harry found joy in the little things: late-night talks, weekend gardening, and reading together under the shade of the mango trees in their backyard. Their love didn't burn loudly. It glowed quietly, like a lantern in the dark. One evening, as Sandra was preparing a speech for a girls' empowerment event, Harry walked in with a package. "It's from one of the girls who graduated from the foundation," he said with a smile. Sandra opened it and found a handmade card that read, "Thank you for not giving up on yourself. Because you didn't, I didn't either." Tears filled her eyes. That night, she stood before a crowd of young girls, mothers, fathers, and community leaders. Her voice was calm, but every word struck deep. "I was once a girl with no roof, no food, no family. I begged for work. I slept in abandoned buildings. I was forgotten. But through pain, I discovered strength. And through humility, I found love. Not everyone will understand your journey. But never allow your past to silence your purpose." The hall was silent. Then the clapping began, loud and long, echoing like thunder. After the event, Sandra and Harry sat in their car, watching the stars. "Do you ever think of how different life could have been?" Harry asked. Sandra smiled. "I do. But I thank God it wasn't." He held her hand, and for a moment, they sat quietly. Then Sandra whispered, "If I had to go through all the pain again just to end up here, I would." Harry looked at her, heart full. She had not only stolen his heart. She had given it a home. And so, the maid who was once forgotten, became unforgettable. Her story reminds us that no matter how broken your beginning, you can still write a beautiful ending. That true love does not seek riches or fame, it sees the soul. And that kindness, no matter how small, always finds its way back. Don't let your past define your future. Never look down on someone because of where they started. Real love sees beyond appearance and status. When you rise, lift others with you. Humility is stronger than pride, and kindness leaves a lasting mark. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that prove that love, courage, and kindness still exist in the world. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Sandra's shoes?